He's the underdog. No one expects him to win. There's a lot of people who expect a lot from Hoej. And you actually had a chance to talk to the players just this morning, and it really came through in how well rested they felt. Hoej, he was pretty nervous last night. He had trouble sleeping. Said he only got maybe 2 hours of sleep. DocPwn, he just slept comfortably for 6 or 7 hours. He is well rested and ready to go.
That's really rough. So Hoej definitely working on fatigue to start things off, but I guess it's better that you're the first match as opposed to later as it drags out through the day. Let's go into the first game here. We have Priest versus Druid. Remember, DocPwn is playing the Dragon Highlander Priest, which has a lot of fantastic tools from the new expansion. People are looking at Dustbreaker, the first culprit that strikes down a lot of these aggressive hordes with 3 damage to all minions.
And Hoej playing the aggro Druid. This is a matchup that can be pretty tough for the Druid, because there are so many tools, especially in the Dragon version, including that Dustbreaker, that can clear off the Druid's board. The aggro Druid relies on getting generally a number of smaller minions in play, buffing them with either Mark of the Lotus, we see in the left side of Hoej's hand, or Power of the Wild. And if you're able to AoE that board, it can be difficult for them to rebuild.
That's right. And Hoej saw that DocPwn kept a handful of cards. Having Raza in the opening hand is something that he kind of reads. But with this Mark of Yasharaj and Chain of Raven combo, it's a very powerful card to start things off. Look at DocPwn picks up a way to deal with the Chain of Raven early on.
Yeah, the Holy Smite here is actually pretty huge, because the Mark of Yasharaj would turn that Raven into a 4/4, which would prevent DocPwn from being able to use any of his removal spells on it easily and allow him to just keep up the pressure. Now, Power Word Shield plus Smite, that's a 1/5 Cleric, and no board left over for Hoej.
Yeah, now Mark of Yasharaj can't do anything, and now all of a sudden, instead of having the board and snowballing it, Hoej has no chance to actually even win the board.
Hoej does still have the South Sea Captain, which will pull Patches out of his deck, giving him a 3/3 and a 2/2 on the board. That will stand up against this Cleric, at least immediately, and potentially allow him to use some of these AoE buff effects in his hand.
That is true. Sometimes you just use Mark of Yasharaj simply as a 2/2 buff to accelerate your board position. Of course, the big thing that Hoej is trying to land is a big swing opportunity with the Corridor Creeper. This card has dominated the early fields of Kobolds and Catacombs to the point where people are just keeping it in the opening hand because it's so powerful, and you know that you can discount it very easily because of cards like Patches and early game minions.
It's especially powerful in a deck like the one Hoej is playing that has lots of cards that make multiple minions. Whether they are a pirate bringing out Patches or living mana, lots of things that can enable you to build a board that one single sweeper effect. Speaking of a sweeper, that is a Duskbreaker drawn for DocPwn, but so far he does not have another dragon. Oh, no, he does. I missed that draw last turn.
That was from the Power Word Shield.
There we go. Sitting right next to it, it's hiding.
I love this play here from Hoej too, because even though people look at Power of the Wild as a +1/+1 to your minions, Hoej really wants to get this Mark of Yasharaj down and be able to buff his board. And he also saw that DocPwn played the top-decked Holy Smite, meaning that if DocPwn had some kind of early game removal that he kept, he probably would have played that instead.
Yeah, and Hoej now leaves him with the ability to potentially play South Sea Captain into coin Mark of the Lotus next turn, which gives him the ability to get that 4/4 Captain out, as well as get the Patches buffed to 3/3 immediately when it's attacking. All of this does line up pretty poorly, unfortunately, for him against that Duskbreaker, which DocPwn just drew.
There's a couple of the key differences that separate DocPwn from maybe some of the other lists you even see on the ranked play. You have Alex Straza as a top-end dragon. DocPwn does not play Bone Drake or Bookworms, some of those mid-range dragons instead. And he feels like Alex Straza removes the need for reliance on the Prophet Veiling combinations, because you can lower your opponent's health and sometimes not even use Raza. You just use Shadow Reaper and doing hero power over the course of multiple turns.
One interesting thing for Hoej here, having played the Power of the Wild last turn, he now does have a target for the Mark of Yasharaj that will draw him a card.
Yeah.
So he could choose to buff this this Panther here and either get this Cleric off the board or just get 5 damage in. That would also be leaving his board less vulnerable to a Duskbreaker compared to just a big push with the Mark of the Lotus.
Yeah, Duskbreaker is something you're fearing. Hoej saw that the card being kept to DocPwn is still in the hand, actually both of them, because there's Acolyte of Pain as well. So Hoej will try to remove most of this board, it looks like. Cleric's a big threat.
And removing the Cleric is pretty crucial here too, because it forces DocPwn to have no way to attack into the South Sea Captain, even with the Duskbreaker. So Duskbreaker can come down and AoE the board, but there will still be a 4-1 Captain remaining if it does.
If you're in Hoej's position, you see DocPwn keep 2 cards in the opening hand that he still hasn't played by now. Are you sweating a little bit? Because he's still playing the Duskbreaker from 2 cards that he hasn't seen.
Right, and that's got to be pretty scary. It's one of the cards you may expect that is in your opponent's hand, given the fact that there was something kept. But now, the fact that there are still several other cards there can be pretty scary for him as well.
This could be 2 back-to-back turns of immense pressure from Hoej. He has the Quarter Creeper, which he's been setting up. He's been aware that even if DocPwn cleared it, he would have a very cheap Big Beast. And he has Beer-Tide Hydra to follow it up. And those are back-to-back minions that's not going to be easy for DocPwn to answer.
Yeah, lots of big threats here from Hoej. And trading here does mean the Creeper costs just 1 mana. He could even play the Mark of Yasharaz on it immediately if he wants to use the rest of his mana for the turn, as well as potentially draw into another threat he could play. Yeah, he's going to go ahead and do that. Mark of Yasharaz right now, that's a 7/7. And the Corsair, not so impressive, but it's no longer bringing out patches, but does just give him a little bit more presence on that board.
And now DocPwn will have an option between Draconid Operative and Roz the Chained. And normally, some of the differences could be chalked up to how important it is to have tempo onto the board or even have that extra card. But in a lot of cases, since that 7/7's out there and dominant, if you really want to be able to hero power, I think Raza here's a good call.
Yeah, Raza, if nothing else, just gives you effectively 2 life per turn. Your hero power goes to 0 mana. It enables you to just keep healing yourself and getting your life total further out of range of that threat.
As a position from Hoej that he's been hoping for, where Priest does not have an answer to the first threat, so how does he hope to deal with 2?
Hoej has a number of interesting options here. He can choose to just push his 7 damage to the face, which does leave him a little bit more vulnerable to getting the Hydra specifically killed, but he needs that 7 damage, especially with that Raza in play. He needs to keep pushing damage, so I like this more aggressive push of the damage to the face rather than trying to trade to protect the slightly bigger minion.
Right, this is the turn for a Dragonfire Potion if DocPwn has one. We are aware, of course, that we'll try to fix the hand screens as soon as possible. But that's not the case here. DocPwn has Blood Mage Thalnos, he has Potion of Madness, Spirit Lash. A little bit awkward in order to deal with this threat. He doesn't even have the ultimate card to answer. The mother of all removals, Psychic Scream. That's also going to be a turn 7 threat.
Blood Mage plus Spirit Lash has got to be at least somewhat attractive here because it enables him to kill the Pirate, it enables him to heal up a bit, get some damage on the Hydra, and then potentially attack into and kill the Corridor Creeper.
Right.
It looks like DocPwn, he was debating going with the Operative, which was online thanks to the draw of the Primordial Drake.
It's so scary because of the threat of Savage Roar. Even if there's just 2 minions on board, that's 6 plus the 15 on board. That's threatening your 21 life. You're really close to dying at that point.
And this gets rid of the Pirate and gets some damage in against Hoej, but there's 15 power left up.
Right. He is out of range of Savage Roar and Hero Power. Ooh, Living Mana. One of the most powerful cards available to the Aggro Druid, but is this the turn to play it going into turn 7?
Right, this is a scary spot for Hoej because a Psychic Scream here would not only eliminate his entire board, but if they're the Living Mana treants, eliminate all of his mana. So that ends up being a pretty terrifying proposition for the Danish player.
I do want to say, though, Aggro Druid versus the Highlander Priest is a heavily unfavored matchup for the Aggro Druid, given how much removal. And then you compound it by the fact that this is the Dragon version, which has additional area effect, like Primordial Drake, Duskbreaker. So how much time do you really have to save Living Mana? Is it a risk that you have to take?
I don't think so in this spot. He does have the Enchanted Raven. He has the Glockcrawler as well if he just wants to go a little bit wider. And there is, of course, I mean, even just looking at DocPwn's hand, that Blood Mage plus Spirit Lash, if he does play Living Mana, is an enormous swing. that would lead to essentially just gaining his entire life total back and clearing all the small minions from the board. And yeah, Hoej, he wants to go a little bit wider, make it so that there's just a little bit of damage available for DocPwn.
Yeah, that is backbreaking. There's going to be 7 minions on the board times 2, so 14 life gained, plus killing everything except for the Kalaka Crawler at 2-3 at his disposal.
Yeah, and the Potion of Madness last turn may not have looked like a huge deal. May only have looked like it was taking a small minion off the board, but it set this up. It set up attacking both 5-power minions into the 7 health minions.
That's right.
And enabling the Blood Mage plus Spirit Lash to clear off those big minions. So
that's right.
The little play from DocPwn last turn set up this really big one this turn.
Doc just had to have the discipline to take a little risk in hoping that Druid can't finish the game with 2 cards.
Just gained 16 life.
Yeah.
And removed Hoej's entire board save 1 Kalaka Crawler, and has Primordial Drake set up for next turn against the Living Mana.
Right. That is, of course, if Hoej had some way to additionally buff. If he had Mark of the Lotus in addition to the Living Mana, that's when it starts getting a little scary. But Hoej does not really have much of a choice. He has to reload, and this matchup, again, on paper, very favored for the Dragon Highlander Priest. So not too shocking to see it commandly take the board, but that was a scary moment for DocPwn.
And now things are equally scary, if not more so, for Hoej, because he had good pressure going, but now suddenly the tables are absolutely turned the other direction. And it is DocPwn who is firmly in the driver's seat, as Hoej is very low on resources, and DocPwn has a lot of life left. And this is just what we were talking about at the beginning. You know, if there is a single big sweeper, that's often enough for the Priest to stabilize in this matchup, because they have access to so many more. And that the Spirit Lash in particular got DocPwn not only into a safe board state, but up to a safe life total. So even if he didn't have an immediate clear against a lot of things, he would still have the ability to clean things up and stay alive.
This is a very good technical play from Hoej. He actually purposely gives himself 1 less Treant in the case he draws Savage Roar.
Yes.
So we have 3 mana to play it in case DocPwn couldn't answer everything. But DocPwn can. He has the Primordial Drake, and also he even just picked up Shadow Visions, which would have given him another out to pick up removal like the Dragonfire Potion.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and bounce the Acolyte off of the Firefly to pick up a card prior to playing the Primordial Drake, which will get him another card, as well as clear off Hoej's entire board.
Hoej gets the bad news that Primordial Drake lands on the board. And I can't think of another card to pull him out here. He's going to see his next draw, but Chew the Storm, incredibly weak. I guess you could play it as a poisonous minion.
Yep.
Oh, that's about it. Jeez. And in the meantime, DocPwn will now be starting to threaten to kill the Aggro Druid because he's stabilized, and now he has really powerful minions coming up.
Yeah, and this is essentially all over but the crying. You know, DocPwn has a handful of cards that he can use to clean up Hoej's board, and more than enough life to work with. That Shadow Pain allows him to take out the poisonous spider here, and it is not going to be any closer in this game. We're going to see the first game go to the rookie.
That will be a concession. DocPwn strikes the first blood in this best of 5, taking out the aggressive Druid within quotation marks. From here, this is where it gets tough.
Yeah, and this is one of the decks from Hoej that is very powerful against DocPwn's lineup. In fact, this is probably the strongest matchup right here, the Murloc Paladin against the Jade Druid that Hoej has available this entire match.
That's right. Murloc Paladin has historically beat up against slower Druid variants. If you play a slower Ramp Druid or the Jade Druid, it takes too long for you to build up a wall of defense. And also, because Murlocs have such strong synergies that even if you go, you do have anti-aggro cards like Spreading Plague. They're very tall because of the Murloc buffs and how everything stacks together.
And Murloc Paladin is a deck that has gotten some powerful tools from the release of Kobolds and Catacombs. It's the reason we see Knife Juggler in this hand. Call to Arms, specifically,
yes,
is one of the absolute strongest cards in the entire set, and it works very well in Murloc Paladin. Able to set up a board often full of small Murlocs that you can then buff with a War Leader or a Gentle Megasol.
Hoej going for the cream scale jump, recognizes that there's a possibility DocPwn removes that in the first turn with the coin here in some capacity, but wants to get that Murloc buff guaranteed as opposed to play the Violent Inquisitor and then strand the battle card.
Yeah, the Lesser Jester Spellstone we just saw played by DocPwn, that's one of the very powerful tools that Jade Druid did get in the new set. It gives you early game interaction, which is very important against a deck like Murloc Paladin. We see getting that Murloc off the board immediately can definitely help slow Hoej down, and that's just what DocPwn needs.
Yeah, DocPwn opted to save the coin because his hand's pretty slow. He needs a lot of time. And right now, his first real action is turn 10, Ultimate Infestation in the Arcane Tyrant. And then if he lets his opponent live, there's a threat of the Rockpool Hunter buffing 2-1, and then it would be a disaster.
Yeah, but now the just removal into removal, leaving Hoej with a pretty heavy hand. This is the Tarim plus Steed plus Corridor Creeper, especially Corridor Creeper drawn after the opening hand when multiple minions have already died. This is pretty slow from the Danish player, and not at all the start that he's looking for in the matchup.
Absolutely. Look at how big it would have been if Corridor Creeper was in the opening hand instead of Tarim, for example. They swapped spots. Corridor Creeper would cost 5, and most likely one of these minions could die. So it would cost 4. He'd play that right on curve and be able to keep up the pressure. So a very big difference whether or not he had it in his opening hand, and why so many top players recommend you keep Corridor Creeper. And
these are some of the only expensive cards in Hoej's deck. He only has a single copy of Corridor Creeper in addition to these that costs more than 5. And his 5 slot is a single Finjen. So it's a pretty unfortunate draw for Hoej here. He's going to need to find something that he can play immediately, which is essentially his entire deck. Call to Arms is probably the best draw. Righteous Protector, not too hot, doesn't really put that much pressure on, but is relatively difficult for DocPwn to necessarily easily remove before, say, Sunkeeper Tarim can buff it up.
And one thing that's also kind of interesting, too, is because Righteous Protector won't die to a Druid hero power, Corridor Creeper won't be discounted to 5. And Druid has nothing to play next turn. So in a very weird way, because DocPwn will be skipping, he actually denies Hoej any guaranteed play based off what he knows. He's going to have to rely on a draw.
And DocPwn's hand is very well suited to punishing a slow draw here from Hoej. He can buy a lot of time with those 2 copies of Spreading Plague in his hand. Malfurion the Pestilent can also buy a lot of time. And of course, that time gets him to Ultimate Infestation, which can really swing the game.
Hoej thinks about what's the value in perhaps letting my opponent kill off a minion versus developing this Righteous Protector. But with Sunkeeper Tarim and Spike Recede in the hand, I think he wants to make turn 6 his big spike of power, as opposed to rely on his opponent not doing anything.
And now a Spellstone from DocPwn, which no longer causes double animation.
Yes.
And
that's quite
War
the draw.
Leader is a very good draw here.
Yes.
It allows Hoej to push a bunch of damage right now. Perfectly fits into his curve alongside the hero power. Does potentially walk into a swipe from DocPwn here, but there's a board of 3 minions could have gotten swiped up here. So there's not really a lot of options for Hoej. He has to pressure.
Yeah, and because Righteous Protector is kind of a little fragile minion onto the board, it ends up playing into Spreading Plague, but he also has Sunkeeper Tarim, which helps him get past the minions.
And especially with Murloc War Leader, because Tarim sets the minions to 3/3, but that doesn't count the War Leader buffs.
You're right.
So it means that all of the Murlocs will be 5 power to attack into and kill the Scarabs.
That's true. The problem, though, is then the Scarabs can kill off his own minions as well, so he's going to have to weigh what he really wants to do. You want to prioritize setting up for Spike Recede and Corridor Creeper. And I think you want to put as much power onto the board. Do not give Jade Druid time. DocPwn has not played Ramp. He hasn't played significant AoE removal spells like Swipe. So I think at this point, you just kind of put as much pressure and force your opponent to have it. And also, important to note, DocPwn kept both of these Spreading Plagues in his opening hand.
Well, I think he kept one of them.
Correct.
Yeah, he kept one of them in Mulligan.
Both of them in his starting.
Yeah.
And because he knows that this could be a really powerful card. Arcane Tyrant tries to swing the board.
Yeah, and the Spreading Plague here, does give Hoej the opportunity to play Tarim and trade off the board, but that's never what you want to be doing against a Spreading Plague. You're trading, pretty much your entire board for a card from your opponent.
Okay. Interesting.
So the Tarim does set up a potential Corridor Creeper here as well, because he does trade off a bunch of minions. He can play the Creeper for free.
Yes, that is true.
There's also the possibility that he wants to just play, say, Spike Rich Steed, get one of his Murlocs buffed, kill off one of these Scarabs. Because the Tarim here is essentially just setting up, you know, you're trading off 4 of your minions for 4 of your opponent's Scarabs, and doesn't really get you into a great position pushing damage. So I think he'd rather be in a position where he's using his other tools to pick away at these Scarabs. Okay, yeah, he's gonna go ahead and take out one of them. Yeah, this enables Hoej to remove one of them without losing his minions, and still play the Corridor Creeper here, and have his specifically War Leader still protected by the Tarim here. So nice sequencing from Hoej to maximize that Tarim.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we're talking about. Murloc Paladin can have tall and wide boards simultaneously. So Spreading Plague number 2 is no longer as powerful. Hoej saw that DocPwn's been keeping that for a long time. Now here's another thing too. Without coin or ramp, Hoej knows that DocPwn is going to be missing a lot of power swings like Malfurion, the Bestial being able to come down. So now DocPwn is really under the mercy of Murloc Paladin's tempo.
And without any way to specifically gain armor, that Spellstone is only just the unupgraded version here. He's used his hero power once since that's been in his hand, so it still takes 2 more armored upgrades. We can't get it online this turn to get a easier clear. I mean, he could attack both of his minions into the Tarim, play his Spreading Plague to get 4 Scarabs here, and have a single one of them able to trade into Tarim.
Yeah. Or so he thinks. Until Spike Rich Steed might ruin his day.
It's the plan, at least.
I mean, I think that's the best value that you can expect, given that the board will most likely continue to get tall and wider, because Murloc War Leader exists, so you can't even expect the small tokens to be fodder for Spreading Plague.
Now there's 2 options for Hoej here. The Gentle Megasaur could allow him to play Megasaur plus Maul, which gives him another way to take down some of these Scarabs. The Steed, though, on his Tarim allows him to have a sort of double layered protection for that War Leader here.
Yes.
And there's only currently 2 Murlocs that the Megasaur will be buffing.
And you want to try to, and another reason too is because it makes swipe math a little more complicated. You can't remove all the big threats simultaneously.
Right.
Let me think.
And also, I think Hoej's seen that DocPwn's had a pretty awkward hand. He's been playing coin, Spreading Plague into Spreading Plague. Potentially has a very heavy-handed amount of cards in his hand. So Malfurion is a very likely candidate to come up as well, which would set up for a good follow-up push. Attack with the War Leader would set up an easy Champion's Maul, but chooses not to, given that he has 2 or his multiple 5 attack sources.
And he still has the option to attack with the War Leader and Maul next turn if he wants to,
right?
Without exposing his War Leader to a potential unupgraded Spellstone.
That is also true too. Spellstone could be a problematic, but at the same time, Malfurion the Pestilent gets that 5 armor, so Spellstone should be able to at least get max damage.
Yep.
If DocPwn needs to. And DocPwn picks up Wild Growth, which might seem not that great now, but it does give him a way to actually get to Ultimate Infestation a turn earlier, which could make all the difference in the world whether or not he has enough time.
Yeah, it helps bridge him to 10 next turn, which, or rather, use next turn to bridge the following turn, which can be a very big deal.
The only thing about Malfurion is that your tempo is pretty bad. I mean, he hasn't gotten his Jades actually rolling, and you think about it, as much as it's fantastic to try and stall the game, you have to find a way to win the game, and Murloc Paladin's board doesn't look like it's disappearing anytime soon. Yeah,
there's a lot of remaining bodies on the board for Hoej here. And I assume we're going to see some Scarabs?
Ooh.
The Spooters?
Poison Spiders.
That makes the Champion's Maul really appealing for Hoej here.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect Tidecaller into Megasaur as well.
I'm wondering if like Wind Fury just might even straight up threaten to end the game.
His Divine Shield. Divine Shield can allow him to use one of his Murlocs to take down a poisonous spider without any drawback. Doesn't lose anything. Yeah, DocPwn I think was debating here whether it was even possible to keep himself alive without removing any of these threats from Hoej. And yeah, the Divine Shield is pretty huge. Interestingly, it actually means that the Champions Maul would lose the a single 1-1 if he decided to play it, but I think he's fine with.
Not full value, but I think he's willing to take that. Now, would you want to keep the Divine Shield under War Leader, or would you want to?
Yeah, you definitely want the War Leader to have Divine Shield. I can even see just attacking face with both of these.
Sure.
And you have just the Tarim, who's going to leave another minion there, and you get 5 damage to the face. You are protecting a 5-power minion that would turn to a 3-power minion. But here, the fact that the Divine Shield is on the War Leader is huge, because that Spellstone no longer can take out the War Leader.
Exactly.
So there's far, far more damage capable of coming from Hoej's side, thanks to the buff of the War Leader on all the other minions.
Yeah. Where's a Flame Strike when you need one, even if you had an opportunity to it, right? Everything's at like 4 health, or even then it's complicated. Hoej set up such a powerful board that's resilient to all forms of AoE or single target removals. And Doc just took too long to get to this point.
Yeah, no ramp from DocPwn definitely left him in a situation where he was just playing from behind the entire time. He did have the opportunity to play removal into removal, which slowed down Hoej, which is why he has gotten to this late stage of the game. But we are seeing the power of the Murloc Paladin specifically with all these ability to buff these wide boards and make them into big threats. So even though there was spreading play coming down, it didn't really do enough to keep the damage off the board. And yeah, this 2-2 Jade, 1-1 Jade, and a Spellstone, not really going to be enough. This does keep DocPwn from being able to even Wild Growth, so he can't Ultimate Infestation next turn. And I think we may just have lethal damage here. I think the Rock Pool allows us to set up so that the rest of the damage can just push through for lethal. Yeah, and DocPwn, he sees, okay, didn't actually even need the Rock Pool, just had the additional minion, and evens things up. Hoej takes, as DocPwn did in the first game, a pretty favorable matchup. Is someone who has had a lot of success outside HCT events over the past several years. This is really his breakout on this stage, and he's hoping to make the most of it.
There's also quite some funny stories around the Hearthstone community about Hoej and his twin brother.
Oh,
where, Hoej even plays into the jokes, like, yeah, did you, like, they're like, are you smurfing Hoej? Am I playing like you on a different account? He's like, no, that's my twin brother.
I think someone was actually playing against Hoej's brother like yesterday in an event, and Hoej was sitting next to them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Are you using your like, Wonder Twin powers to communicate to him by hand?
Or
here?
was
What's
that really
on?
Hoej sitting next to him and perhaps his twin brother the entire time? We never really know.
All right, well, we have a battle of druids here for game number 3 with the aggro druid from Hoej against DocPwn and his Jade druid. And now we see once again the turn 1 removal of the Lesser Jasper Spellstone coming up pretty huge here, because not only did it get the 2-2 off the board, it has now stranded these 2 Mark of Yasharaj in Hoej's hand from having a beast to enchant.
Hoej was banking off the fact that DocPwn kept so many cards, perhaps he didn't have early game removal when he prioritized ramp. But this is the kind of hand that you're looking for if you're Jade Druid. You're going to be able to curve Jade Behemoth and Aya very easily. And Hoej, he's got some plays, but he doesn't get the synergy with Mark Yasharaj and a Beast, which is a very big deal, being able to continue to get a little bit more ammo to pressure the Jade Druid.
Yeah, now the Corsair can come down, summon patches. He could use one of these Mark of Yasharaj just to push some damage, but that's not the buff he's looking for. When you have a wide board like this, you really want to have your Mark of the Lotus, your Power of the Wild, something that really increases the power of all of your minions. And without a Beast here, he's going to run a little thin on cards if he uses these buffs.
At the same time, though, perhaps even if he did draw cards, it wouldn't be nearly as impactful if Druid doesn't have a way to answer just 3-4s hitting him every turn. We've seen the power of Totem Golem, be able to just single-handedly threaten Druid and ruin their game plan. The big thing is whether or not DocPwn can not only control the board, but also pressure Druid off of this Living Man. Because I think Living Man is going to be a big point of whether or not DocPwn is able to stabilize and win. And
I like this from Hoej, choosing to use the Mark of Yasharaj on his patches. It does protect his single 1 health minion from the threat of a Cycled Wrath or a Hero Power, and does mean that he's able to use his mana to pressure, which is really important. It's not maximizing the use of Mark of Yasharaj, but he is maximizing the use of his mana, which is crucial when you're trying to kill your opponent before cards like Spreading Plague really shut you down.
Yeah, and one of the more interesting things about Jade Druid is that it's gotten better at fighting aggro these days, which is something that you don't really expect. Jade Druid is supposed to be a controlled deck killer. It's supposed to have infinite resources of Jade idols and able to put out up to, theoretically 30 Jades. But at the same time, most of the tools these days, especially in the World Championship, have gotten better at fighting aggressive decks. So even though traditionally an aggressive Druid has a huge percentage favor, it's actually much more even than you think.
Yeah, it has gotten a lot better with the inclusion of the Spellstone, and even just like Arcane Tyrant makes a big difference because it gives you the ability to ramp with a Nourish and still get something down that can impact the game. And Wild Growth into Wrath here, which looks like what DocPwn is going for, is really going to slow things down. It's going to put Hoej down to just 3 power in play, while DocPwn has 3 6-drops in his hand he can start casting next turn.
Yeah, and a little bit of a punish for buffing the patches instead of something else. DocPwn would have to choose whether or not to hero power that down, or whether or not he would be able to use that Wild Growth. That is indeed Hoej's brother in the stands watching alongside that he's mentioned and we're also often joking about. He's cheering on Hoej along with his other members of the family.
Now we're really sure that's his brother?
Are we really? Yeah, actually, is that
they're not
Hoej?
trading places here?
No. Marka Yashiraj here from Hoej. He drew Savage Roar, which is his finisher if he's able to get his Living Mana board. But does he have enough time? Because DocPwn is now starting to hit his most powerful cards against the aggressive Druid with Spreading Plagues and all his Jades.
Yeah, another Mark of Yashiraj on a non-beast minion, and you can see just how Hoej's resources are dwindling here, down to just 2 cards. Does keep the pressure on DocPwn down to 19, but now it is Spreading Plague or Jade Behemoth time for the Canadian player. I have to think that this is actually a tough decision because Jade Behemoth does give DocPwn a minion that will actually kill some of the minions that Hoej has. And Spreading Plague actually gets better as time goes on because of Living Mana specifically.
Yes.
Your Jade Behemoth is always going to be a 3/6 taunt. But if your opponent does Living Mana against you, your Spreading Plague can often be 7 Scarabs rather than 3 it would be right now. So I think that's what DocPwn is considering here, whether he wants to try to just defend himself with the Plague, or maybe actually exchange to get some of Hoej's bodies off the board with the Behemoth.
Yeah, Jade Behemoth seems to contest the board very well. You even have the leftover 1/1 and potentially get that little bit extra damage.
I wonder if you could even make an argument for playing Aya here.
I think the threat of Savage Roars is really big. There's 5 plus 8, so it's 13. Yeah, I guess you could technically get away with it. Still a scary proposition, though, if you're trying to let your opponent deal as much damage as possible.
But one of the arguments to potentially playing Aya there is that if you play the Behemoth, your opponent can't really play a Living Mana that well, and you kind of want them to play Living Mana with the Plague in your hand, maybe.
Right.
But regardless, this Behemoth is quite the roadblock here. Only 5 power on the board for Hoej, so he'll have to either use his hero power or the Savage Roar to help punch through. And I imagine there's a good chance he wants to hold to that Savage Roar to actually end up as a finisher.
It's hard to say, too, because Living Mana only summons 4 Treants. It's limited by the amount of space you have on board. So he would go down to 1 Mana Crystal, which means he only has 2 the following turn. Can't even Savage Roar guaranteed. And most players will know to not give you enough Mana Crystals to Savage Roar. So it's not even like Hoej can set up a very clean 1-2 play here with the cards in hand.
Yep.
So if he uses Savage Roar, he can get through the Jade Behemoth and hopefully let this 3/4 do a little bit more damage. Maximum pressure coming here for Hoej. DocPwn has a couple answers here ready for him.
Ooh, the swipe is actually a really big draw to follow up a Spreading Plague potentially. Yeah. Because if your opponent is bumping each of those treants into one guy, 2 by 2, 1 by 1, whatever, they all often will end up with just 1 health left, and that allows your swipe to take out the entire board once they've been softened up by the Scarabs.
There is a punish though with buffs on the Living Mana tokens, but we know that Hoej does not have that whatsoever. So he is just trying to go for maximum pressure and hope that DocPwn is going to play offensive cards.
What to do?
Spreading Plague looks pretty appetizing though when you think about it. However, Hoej made a play that maximized the amount of pressure on for the minions. Very confident. He didn't open up his mana to potentially play Power of the Wild. So maybe DocPwn will be scared and will want to immediately limit the amount of damage on board by using Swipe Distance.
Yeah, by attacking in first here, DocPwn obviously is able to set himself up to get an additional Scarab because he has one fewer minion, and now his Behemoth able to take down the buffed Firefly. And now, Hoej has actually less power in play, or not, barely more than DocPwn here.
Now, several players, when we were talking to them, we're talking about how they just don't have faith in Aggro Druid for the ability to close out games. Even the match that they should win, sometimes you can just fizzle because your opponent stabilizes. And unlike a lot of other aggressive decks, it doesn't have ways to just end the game with crazy bursts without a board.
Yeah.
And in this case, Hoej has gotten locked out again. This will be the second game of the series that Aggro Druid has fallen.
It's not looking good for him here, especially with that swipe in DocPwn's hand. With only one mana crystal available this turn, Hoej can only attack. And he can't even hero power this turn. He can only figure out exactly how he wants to maneuver these mana treants into the Scarabs and Behemoth on DocPwn's side of the board. And DocPwn's still at 19.
Time waits for no one.
I mean, again, DocPwn had the luxury of doing this. He could have also, if he didn't have it, he would have Swipe, reduce a lot of the power onto the board. Hoej would be able to Savage Lord for some damage, but wouldn't be able to finish the game. So the Spreading Plague is back-breaking. Hoej does not even attack, doesn't even want to give his opponent the opportunity to swipe without attacking into the minions first. Also, by attacking into these minions, you also let your opponent just remove the board straight up.
And now DocPwn can decide, okay, do I want to pick apart some of these minions? He can also choose, if he wanted to just leave up the treants and prevent Hoej from getting more mana crystals. But the fact that Hoej is going to have 3 next turn no matter what means that Savage Lord is available. So, understandably, DocPwn is going to pick away at this board.
I think it doesn't really matter. I think the Scarabs, their art says it all. There'll be no passing across their side of the board, and DocPwn, once again, will just crush the Aggro Druid's hopes with situational and awkward cards in Hoej's hand right now.
There's a Corridor Creeper, once again, not drawn. I mean, he's got enough mana for it now. He's on turn 7, he can play a 7-drop.
And again, how important is it that Hoej was not able to land those Market Yashiraj with the early game? DocPwn's been prioritizing early removal because he knows of how important it is.
I concede.
And that's going to do it here. Hoej concedes. DocPwn is 1 game away for Hoej. And we'll find out whether or not the underdog can start off HCT with the way it was designed, which is to give names to players who are currently unknown and potentially become the next superstar.
And this is a matchup where Hoej's Aggro Druid, which has struggled so far, does have the edge. And this is a place where Aggro Druid tends to shine because you have a lot of cheap minions, you have a lot of ways to buff your minions and ways to build a wide board against a deck that is less suited to dealing with that kind of strategy.
That's correct. These last 2 matches are favorable matchups for Hoej, at least on paper. And Aggro Druid is definitely one of the more problematic ones for the Tempo Rogue. Not too many bad matchups for this Rogue deck because it has so many good, powerful plays. But at the same time, if you're able to get a really fast start with the Tempo Rogue, you also have some games against the Druid. Backstab is going to be one of those important cards, but without it in the opening hand here, DocPwn is just going to have to hope that these Pirates are enough.
And speaking of Pirates, one of the things that makes the Aggro Druid deck powerful against Tempo Rogue is Galaka Crawler. And that's something that has to be in the back of DocPwn's mind as he has a hand here that's just full of Pirates. There's nothing he can do other than get these Pirates out and hope that Crawler is not waiting for him to play his hand.
Right off the bat, something to consider. If you play this Patches, that makes your Southsea Captain much worse. And your turn 3 play ends up most likely going to be a vanilla minion unless you want to save it with the Southsea deckhand on turn 4. These are things that DocPwn has to consider. What's the value of getting this Swashbuckler tempo in early card?
And also, this Dire Maul is one of the few cards that has really found its way into Aggro Druid from the new set. And it's a huge one in a matchup like this. The 3 health beast that you can play on turn 1 is great in this situation. Just look at this. The 1/3 is able to kill potentially both of these pirates if they were to attack into it, and use the dagger. Also a great body for those Mark of Yashirajas that Hoej has found himself stranded in his hand, unable to play on beasts in previous games.
That's right, and another big thing too is that Hoej has that early quarter creeper, so with all these cheap minions dying, he can plant a really powerful minion and deny Rogue from being able to accelerate any tempo, even if they were to generate it. At best, they'd be able to react.
I wonder.
And Hoej's rest of his hand is also quite powerful. Bloodcell Corsair in his hand to get his own patches, along with that Mark of the Lotus. I mentioned at the beginning of the game, and here we are at turn 2, still kind of the beginning of the game,
Yes.
that the Rogue is generally ill-suited to dealing with boards that do go wide, and Hoej has the ability to make 3 2-power minions next turn. And now DocPwn, despite having that captain in hand, might just be trading his board off here in order to prevent that eventuality.
Just wants Hoej to do the trading for him. Doesn't want to give it up, and plus wanted to power up the South Sea captain best he can. And this ends up being a huge punish from Hoej when he has this Bloodcell Corsair deny the weapon, which means South Sea Deckhand doesn't have the charge if he needed to, and also be able to buff his board.
Yeah, this is a really, really big opportunity for Hoej to take the initiative in the game. The Corsair bringing his patches, Mark of the Lotus, buffing all 3 minions, able to clear off both the pirates if he so chooses.
Be hard-pressed not to do it. Bloodcell Corsair comes out, pulling the patches, and this is a big swing that could be too late for DocPwn to stabilize unless he's able to get bigger tempo cards into his hand, because he's got awkward combo stuff right now.
Yeah, and a lot of the cards in DocPwn's hand are great in the right situation. The captain would have been fantastic if these 2 pirates lived.
Exactly.
And the Minstrel, great against removal-based decks, not so hot here. And now even the weapon removal from the Corsair means that DocPwn has to hero power in order to even play one of these deckhands to give it charge.
That's right. And because 3 minions are dying, guess what becomes 2 mana all of a sudden? Corridor Creeper, 2 mana 5/5, and then some.
In the set reviews, he was a sleeper. No more. It's Corridor Creep.
That's right. Or is it? I mean, it's a pretty powerful play. Turn 4 is often a little bit awkward for Rogue. I mean, some of them are even indecisive of what they're putting in. Some of them are putting Standard Chain Gang, some people are taking it out and trying to go for a turn 5 power spike. Look at Cobalt Scalebane. That's also under discussion, whether or not it should be in Rogue decks. If you're trying to kill Priest, absolutely. But if not, maybe perhaps something else. So this could be the time for Corridor Creeper to shine the most. And also, if your opponent also has Corridor Creeper, you want the action. You want to be able to set the 5/5, play the Power of the Wild, get the trades.
Yeah, and this is Hoej trying to maximize his mana over the next 2 turns. He has the Direwolf Alpha plus Power of the Wild he wants to play last turn, or next turn rather. So he just wants to use his coin now to set up, okay, I'm using all of my cards.
Right.
And this is exactly the kind of scenario that the Rogue struggles in, because even if he finds a Vile Spine Slayer and a Backstab over his next 2 draws, there's still just going to be a really strong wide board that'll be difficult for DocPwn to deal with.
I wonder.
Well, DocPwn also didn't get much help from the Druid card. Forbidden Ancient would be really nice if it was only a 1 mana card, because you could combo it later on. But it's just going to sit dead. And kind of what we were mentioning, the fact that Pirates got pulled out early from DocPwn means he can't go for that decisive board swing. Finally gets Corridor Creeper, but that's also a little bit too late because he can't fight for any reasonable amount of tempo right now. His best play is South Sea Captain and the Deckhand.
Which isn't enough to remove the Corridor Creeper here. DocPwn can get some removal going, but it just does not match up well against Hoej's board. Forbidden Ancient is just making himself 4/4. All right. And yeah, this is a very awkward play into Hoej's board as it stands right.
Fantastic spot here from our Danish player, and DocPwn is a sitting duck right now.
I think he's still, if he had Backstab plus Vile Spine, I think he still might die, because there'd still just be, no, he'd actually just stay alive. He had Backstab, Vile Spine. He could kill the Direwolf Alpha, kill another one of the minions. That would leave him facing down just the 5 damage next turn. But yeah, in this instance, he does not have either of those cards, and I don't think DocPwn's going to find a way out of this.
I wonder.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything. You know, the Elemental can help search for minions, but he doesn't have enough mana for anything else. And no defensive guards. DocPwn nodding his head already, kind of recognizing that I think there's no way out of this game, and it looks like we're going to go to Game 5, Kibler.
Yep. Digging deep, but no way for our amateur player made it to the World Championship to finish this up now. It will, and that can give him the ability to fight back against the Priest. And of course, there is a lot of just a lot of variance depending on what the Priest actually draws. It is a singleton deck, so does not find the right tools at the right time, it can be problematic.
All right, so DocPwn is on the coin this game, which gives him a lot more powerful uses of cards like the Vile Spine Slayer that he has in hand. But Priest isn't exactly very minion-oriented. They care about the state of the board and controlling it, and then being able to kill Rogue and just remove everything. There is the possibility of Priest just playing a defensive fatigue style. And this is an important card that DocPwn just drew. Prince Keleseth comes into the hand here.
Yeah, Keleseth is the single most powerful card in the early game for the Rogue deck to draw. Really powers up everything else in your deck. Specifically, the Keleseth into a pirate pulling a buffed Patches is exceptionally powerful.
I mean, it makes the 5 health minions out of range of Dragonfire Potion. Quarter Creeper and Bone Mare now will be out of that range if Hoej needs to.
And Hoej, he has just kind of a hodgepodge of his powerful combo cards for later on. Obviously, having Prophet Velen plus Mind Blast is great when you're trying to finish your opponent off. It's much less effective when you're trying to keep yourself alive to get to that point.
Yeah, Prince Keleseth, one of the most powerful cards, if not the most powerful card off your mulligans in Hearthstone. It's an absurd win rate when you're able to have it in your opening hand. But it's not infallible. Would you remove this Keleseth here? I guess that's the question for Hoej. Would you bother with a Holy Smite to just remove this 2/2?
Your Holy Smite is going to be dropping in power, especially against the buffed minions from Keleseth. There's not that much it will kill. There was no Shadow Step immediately on the Keleseth, so you at least know that there isn't one in the hand. But still, just getting the 2/2 off the board is worthwhile in order to just prevent the incoming damage and keep yourself alive, give yourself more time.
So the South Sea Captain was something that we were looking at. It brings out 2 3/3s. This Patches is now quite the force to be reckoned with. But Hoej does have Shadow Word Painting. He has Priest of the Feast, 2 methods that can contest the board. What starts getting really scary is if you play Priest of the Feast, get a little greedy, and then you get wrecked by the Vile Spine Slayer coming out on the following turn.
Yeah, I expect that we will see the Shadow Word Pain on the Captain here from Hoej. It stems the bleeding quite a bit, takes off 4 power effectively because it does reduce the Patches down to a 2/2. Also allows Hoej to play Priest of the Feast plus Power Word Shield next turn to gain back some life and get a card deeper into his deck as well.
Oh man, Elven Minstrel, a card that comes from Kobolds and Catacombs, very powerful just from its combo effect, but even more so when you have Keleseth because it gets those buffs immediately into your hand. One of the drawbacks of Keleseth is that if you don't actually draw substantial minions, you could just fizzle out. But Elven Minstrel really makes sure that doesn't happen.
And DocPwn really hoping to find a 1-cost minion here, and he does. Though he doesn't have his dagger up, so the deckhand won't be immediately able to attack, but can allow him to just keep the pressure on with another 3-power minion on the board.
It's true, and with things like Bone Mare and Vile Spine Slayer, there is a lot of value in holding on to the South Sea Captain for future combos.
Right.
So I'm not in a rush to play the South Sea Captain right off the bat here.
Yeah, I think the deckhand will probably stay in DocPwn's hand, and it does. Potion of Madness.
That's interesting. That's actually a pretty powerful card later on because Patches and South Sea deckhand end up killing each other there. And Hoej now has an opportunity to finally draw a card. One of the big things about Highlander Priest is early game, you want to be cycling through your deck, get those really powerful removals, get those really powerful combo-winning cards like Raza and Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Job's done.
3 health heal is also nothing to laugh at.
Finds a Pyromancer, which is another powerful card to
Really good.
help him clear off smaller boards, though does drop significantly in power against an opponent who has Keleseth.
Vile Spine or not Vile Spine here? It's pretty appetizing. Priest of the Feast is one of the more problematic cards because if you don't address it, it's going to undo all the damage that you can deal, and artificially give Priest so much more sustain in this game.
Yeah, and DocPwn recognizes that. Slayer comes down along with backstab for the combo, takes out the Priest of the Feast. Now Hoej.
Oh my goodness.
Acolyte of Pain. This does set up the possibility of Acolyte, Pyromancer, Potion of Madness, which can clear off the Minstrel and Patches and draw Hoej a card. So as you mentioned, one of the key things for the Priest deck, if you don't have those key tools like Raza and Anduin in your opening hand, so many of the cards in the deck do draw cards to accelerate you through to find your combination, as well as, of course, to just keep getting triggers later on. Not gonna play. Oh, he is gonna play the Acolyte. Okay. I saw the targeting arrow, and I'm like, before the Acolyte was in play, I was like, that's confusing. But yeah, we see the Acolyte picks up a card here, finds Silence.
He can cycle it to draw another card off his Acolyte, but chooses to hold on to instead. Now, DocPwn does have cheap quarter creepers, but the one that he kept is still a 5/5 versus the one that he drew is a 6/6. Pretty substantial difference in whether or not he wants to be able to survive big AoEs or whether or not his opponent, he's even afraid of massive AoEs like Psychic Scream.
Here, DocPwn does have the Vile Spine plus Dagger. He can actually kill both these minions on the other side of the board with Vile Spine Dagger and then just drop both creepers if he wanted to. That wouldn't actually leave him super vulnerable to a Dragonfire Potion because of that Keleseth buff in the second one.
Right.
So he'd still have one minion that would be able to survive, and that would potentially leave a minion for the Bone Mare next turn.
The countdown is ticking on those mana costs from Quarter Creeper. I feel like it's like a bomb, you know, with detonations. When it hits 0, you know that you're in trouble. I guess if you're DocPwn, you know that things are cooking. Just wants to play
just the one.
One Quarter Creeper.
Okay. Is he not killing the Acolyte?
I think what's in his mind is the Psychic Scream.
Sure.
Not really necessarily considering the Dragonfire Potion really as much.
I mean, this does leave Hoej in a position where he can attack into the 6/6 and then Dragonfire Potion, clearing the board. DocPwn would have the ability to play Creeper into Bone Mare if he wants, but that's really scary into your opponent's 8-mana turn.
Exactly. The Bone Mare sets up a really tough dynamic for the Rogue player in this matchup, because if you don't Bone Mare, you give Priest a lot of time to stall, but if you do, you play directly oftentimes into Shadow Reaper Anduin to destroy every single minion that has 5 attack or more, which Bone Mare can't avoid, unless there's a 0 attack minion on board, which is rarely the case.
Finds Bloodmage Thalnos, which interestingly can pair with the Dragonfire later turns to blow up slightly bigger things, but gonna go ahead and pull the trigger right now.
But this is kind of what DocPwn was hedging against. Whether or not he goes for this Bone Mare is going to depend on if he feels like he has enough time. Looks like he's just aiming for the Quarter Creeper. I don't blame him. I mean, at the same time, I think you usually have to go for the Bone Mare play, because if they don't, and a lot of times the way Hoej's playing indicates he doesn't have Shadow Reaper Anduin, you can just win right there.
I think that he has enough threat he can play that doesn't die to Anduin, that he can spread things out. He can play the Flame Elemental and or deckhand here to leave him with a board that isn't super vulnerable to an Anduin. And still, if an Anduin did come down, you still have the Bone Mare to set things up on one of your other minions.
It's true. He is giving up a lot of his cheap cards, though, so if it gets cleared and he doesn't have a Bone Mare target, I guess he at least has the Lich King, so he's okay with that as well.
Well, seeing the Dragonfire Potion, there's only really a Psychic Scream that can clear this off at this point, or Akanai Circle that can clear off this board right now.
It's true.
And you think about the Leroy right now. Leroy's actually pretty powerful here, especially with the buff, because the smaller minions, the Whelps, won't actually be able to clear it off. Yeah,
going for it. That's really cool. Shutting down both of those Whelps to deny AoE.
And now Hoej really needs some help here. He really have to find Psychic Scream, Binding Heal. Velen plus Binding Heal can get him a bit of life here, but he's just got a smattering again of those combo cards. You know, there's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So even Velen Binding Heal put him just barely out of lethal range. neither Raza nor Anduin available for Hoej this entire game. Did find Dragonfire Potion to help clear things up, but is really struggling to deal with the second push after the first AoE.
Yeah, and the extra damage from Kaliseth really stacking the pressure up against Hoej.
Quickly.
Does he stay alive if he plays goes for a Tark Reaper play instead?
If he just plays Tark Reaper, he's going to die because
So he has the Binding Heal as well.
I think he made, yeah. So this puts him to 18. There's 10, 11, I think 15 that DocPwn can push through with the Bone Mare after the Tark Reaper.
It's like 16, yeah, 15. You can't really dagger as well, so puts Hoej to 3 life. But at the same time, you have to think, even if he survives, what's his out there? It's just purely Shadow Reaper Anduin or Psychic Scream. Does that even keep him that safe? Because he's at 3 health. DocPwn talking to himself, mouthing all the possibilities, thinking about, okay, if he has Shadow Reaper Anduin, what's my out here? Am I gonna play around that possibility? Do I just go for a little bit lighter pressure onto the board?
If he doesn't Bone Mare and doesn't play Lich King, then Velen plus Spirit Lash could be problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Bone Mare is going to come down.
Choose soon.
And by putting it on the
Yes.
the Leroy here, he spreads out such that an Anduin will not end up clearing up most of his board. He'll still be left with 2 minions.
Choosing to kill a Thanos or not, he does. Hawkeye Soul Priest's not gonna do it. Loot Hoarder's not enough either.
Boy's gonna look at this hand, but there is no way to deal with this board from DocPwn.
It doesn't look like it. He can draw with the Loot Hoarder. He can draw against the Loot Hoarder, but I think Circle of Healing is not gonna
Yeah, Circle's not gonna be enough. He can play Soul Priest plus Loot Hoarder, ping it, find Circle, but that's not gonna clear off the Leroy. He could silence the Leroy, but then he doesn't have a ping to kill the Bone Mare, which will still kill him. Trying to find something here.
The last few seconds here of this game could be upon us. Hoy's gonna dig and go for the Hail Mary, hero powering his own Loot Hoarder. But I don't think there's a way. Spirit Lash is too late. DocPwn has upset our spring champion, and we'll move on to the winner's bracket match.
He was the underdog coming in, but as he said, still has to beat me, and didn't work out. Worked out for the Canadian amateur player.
Several players in the top 16 when we were talking to them talked about how DocPwn, you can't sleep on him, even if you don't think his skills are up to par, his deck list and his